teamed up with Scott, but were courageous enough to come forward to tell your story. And you told me this book is not supposed to be a symbol of death. This is supposed to be of hope, correct?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So the title is called City of Death because I'll paint a picture for you of the battlefield itself. So the battlefield, Mosul, was the most deadly urban combat the world has seen since World War II.
Wow.
And it was just the level of carnage and destruction and death was unreal, and it literally World War II levels, right? Well, so the title is City of Death, but then the subtitle is Humanitarian Warriors in the Battle of Mosul. So it was about humanitarians, ex-military guys going in there and helping keep people alive in the middle of this slaughter, in the middle of this death, and it was incredible to be a part of that. And so it's not just about the death. It's not just about the destruction.
Right.
It's a first-person view of a team of guys going in there and saving people's lives. It's all about hope. The book ends with hope. It ends with people being saved. There's tragedy. There's obviously terrible things happen, but at the end of it, there's hope. And then even for me coming home after having seen all this stuff, I offer a message of hope to soldiers and to anybody who's experienced trauma in their life on how to overcome that and how to integrate back into society and live a happy life even after experiencing terrible things. There's a lot of hope in the book. Now,
was this your first suicide mission? How many would you say you would deem, in your opinion, suicide missions that you were on?
I don't use the term suicidal lightly. So this is the only suicidal mission that I've ever been on.
I see.
I've been in a lot of dicey fights, a lot of sketchy things for sure. But that one was definitely suicidal, and we were talking about it before we even went out there and did it. We were we weren't really saying it because you don't want to jinx yourself or talk or dwell on things like death,
right,
and that sort of thing before you go out. But we're looking at each other going, dude, one of us ain't coming back from this thing.
Wow.
At a minimum. And but with that being said, though, we had been involved in a lot of the frontline fighting that was going on in the push into Mosul. So to build a picture for you of the battlefield. So we're humanitarians, right? But we're working directly with the Iraqi army. So a traditional humanitarian mission is going to be, let's say, 4 or 5 miles behind the fighting. You have groups like, for example, like the Red Cross or something like that, right? And then a little bit closer to the fighting, you have maybe a group like Doctors Without Borders, right? Maybe they're a mile behind the fighting.
Right.
And then in between the fighting and those guys, there's maybe some aid stations and whatnot. Well, where we were at was right in the middle of the fighting. We're all armed. We're all engaging the enemy. We're pulling people out. We're pulling out wounded soldiers. We're helping civilians. We're providing covering fire for civilians. And it was the level of heroism I saw from the guys on my team, or the team that I was a part of, was unbelievable. Actually, our interpreter, I don't want to spoil the book, but in the book City of Death, I have to mention it just in case people don't go read the book.
Please.
Our interpreter, his name was Shaheen. He was the Yazidi from northern Iraq, one of the most persecuted groups by ISIS. He was actually shot on the morning of the invasion into Mosul, morning of May 4th, and he died. He died about a week later from his wounds. Also, our Iraqi driver who was working with us, driving the team's Humvee, he was shot 6 times rescuing Shaheen, but he miraculously lived. How? I don't know. The guy was literally shot in the neck and somehow lived.
That's incredible. A neck wound is not good.
No, it's definitely not good at all. And he survived, and so there's a lot of hope.
That's a miracle.
Tragedy and
miracle.
And guys were laying down their lives to free people. And the mission that they were on when they were both shot was the team was going in to rescue a girl who had been shot in the back of the head by ISIS and was still alive, next to her father who had also been shot multiple times by ISIS. And so I wasn't even part of that one. I was back documenting a group of civilians that were fleeing the city, and then I wasn't even involved in that. And so there's so much that happened. That one you could call suicidal. as well. But I wasn't personally a part of it. The other guys did an incredible job.
Your experience with the Iraqi people, how would you describe your experience with them?
The Iraqi people are no different than any other people, right? All humans, we are all the same. Everybody just wants peace and love and happiness. They want to take care of their kids. They're no different than us, not in the slightest. Obviously, there's cultural differences and religious differences, but at the end of the day, they're the same as us. So they were extremely grateful to see us.
Yeah.
When they saw, for lack of a better term, just white Western, American guys, oftentimes people would just break down in tears because they knew they were safe. And so it was an honor to sort of interact with them because they knew as soon as they saw us that we were a symbol of hope and a symbol of liberation, right? But specifically, like the Iraqi soldiers, they were incredible too. I went over there kind of expecting that I was going to see atrocities and maybe see the Iraqi army maybe shoot civilians. I kind of expected to see things like that.
Yeah.
It never happened. I only saw Iraqi soldiers run out under fire, grabbing civilians. I only saw Iraqi soldiers doing incredibly heroic things to protect people, using themselves as human shields. It was incredible. It was absolutely incredible. So the differences that appear on the skin surface, whether race, religion, culture, language, all of those things, although they seem big, they're so small. They're so small. These people are just like us.
Did you get yourself an Iraqi meal when you were over there? Did somebody feed you some Iraqi food?
Well, actually, we mostly ate Iraqi army rations, which was like a styrofoam bowl with rice, and maybe a bite of meat and a few beans. So it was not
all that appetizing.
No, we didn't get to experience some of the authentic food. No.
So you weren't in a house or somebody said, "Hey, before you leave, here, eat a bowl of this."
Actually, we did. Before we went into Mosul, we met with one of the generals of the unit we were working with, and he brought us over to his house, the whole team, and they put on a big meal for all of us. Yeah, the delicious food. I don't know what any of it's called, but yeah,
it was good. It was better than the rations.
Yeah. Definitely better than anything's better than those rations, man.
So I got to ask you, after all of that, and we don't want to give too much more of the book because they got to get it, City of Death, and it's coming out on the 23rd. But more of heroism and just first account of what happened to you and your team. ISIS, we used to hear a lot more atrocities and things happening when Obama was in the White House. Would you say that with Trump in the White House, and not to get too political, do you see that ISIS possibly is more in retreat?
Yeah, I think absolutely. Right now, ISIS is, for all intents and purposes, they're done, they're finished. But you have to keep in mind, ISIS, a lot of these guys, they are now forming new groups with new names, and even guys who still call themselves ISIS, they're still very active in the Philippines right now. The Philippine military is dealing with fighting ISIS right now, and so I think. Well, a couple things as far as on the political end of things. Obviously, I believe that the Obama administration should have been a bit quicker to deal with the ISIS issue, right? Mm-hmm. But you also have to understand too, we had just pulled out from there, so we're not trying to get involved in another big war. So
right.
I kind of understand the hesitation a bit, but ultimately, I agree with our policy of sort of keeping American forces out of the direct fighting and enabling the Iraqis to go out and defend their own country and retake their own country. I completely agree with that, and I think when Trump got into office, the amount of airstrikes and things that were approved went up, and so ISIS was able to be defeated a bit quicker. So I think a combination of the two, honestly, of both policies actually contributed to the defeat of ISIS.
How's the Iraqi army doing?
Well, they are right now. They're having to deal with the aftermath of the war, right? So you still have little pockets of resistance. You have people. The entire country's infrastructure is destroyed. The economy is destroyed. Food and all these things are now an issue. Not let alone plumbing and housing, right? Mm-hmm. All these things they're having to rebuild that. So there are riots, there are demonstrations, people are upset, and there's certainly going to be corruption. There's certainly going to be corruption in certain parts of the government.
Right.
And so the Iraqi army right now is having to kind of interface with the civilian population in a way that they I don't think are used to since the time of Saddam. And as far as I've heard, I haven't heard of any major atrocities or anything like that being committed.
Good. Good.
So I think they kind of learned their lesson from ISIS a bit. So
if you would lend the ear to the president, about ISIS, because we should never be complacent, post 9/11. ISIS is determined, as small as they might be, and maybe they reform in some other name. But there's always going to be haters of the West.
Mm-hmm.
There's always going to be enemies that just don't like what we stand for.
Yes, absolutely. I think an important thing for the American people to understand, and I think the president does understand this. Anybody who gets to that level, I think they understand this. I think you hit it right on the head. This is going to be a constant problem that our world is going to have to deal with for the foreseeable future. Right? It's for the next 200 years. We're going to be dealing with this issue of terrorism at least, and people need to understand. They need to be patient with it. We will never win the global war on terror in the way that people think of winning the war, like where it's done, it's over, there's no more terrorists. It's just not going to work like that. You have to think about it like mowing the lawn.
That's right.
Every couple of weeks you got to go through, and you just got to keep it maintained. You just got to keep it maintained. Don't let it overgrow. Don't let it become too much of a problem. And in the meantime, we are adapting to their tactics. Right, you're dealing with an insurgency, so you're dealing with insurgencies, terrorists, militias, these sort of underground groups, and you have to combat it in a very, very different sort of non-visible way, if that makes sense.
No, complete sense.
And I think we're adapting to doing, and that's how our military is kind of adapting to deal with these folks.
Well, we have a great country, and we could never forget men in uniform that have served so bravely and courageously, and yourself and your team. Do you keep in touch with your team?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I was just messaging with one of the guys, Sky Barkley. I was messaging with him this morning. And so, I keep in contact with all those guys. They're some of my best friends. And I'll say this, too. Like, as dark as the experience was at times over there, I've never laughed as much I've never laughed that much in my entire life. And it was a great group of guys, funny guys, and they kept it lighthearted and incredibly heroic, just good human beings. And I felt it was extremely important to tell the world about these guys. And I really hope that people will go pick it up and read about real superheroes. Not I don't know, like not a Marvel comic.
No, real life heroes that are in uniform and serving our country. American sniper McEwen, Scott McEwen, who was the co-author of the book American Sniper, teamed up with Ephraim for this book, and it's going to come out on the 23rd. So it'll be in bookstores everywhere. City of Death, Humanitarian Warriors in the Battle of Mosul. And Ephraim Mattos has been our guest for this 1 hour. So you thought in our news feed today that we were going to talk about Susan Warren and Pocahontas and about her ancestry fraud, U.S.-Mexico, and the plan to handle the migrant caravan. We're not talking about that, but and perhaps you forked out $1 or $2 for the Mega Millions. Well, of course, $1 billion. This is why the jackpot keeps on ballooning, because everybody's throwing in $100 here and pools and stuff like that. But I got you for an hour, and so they can get that stuff another time, and we can talk about other subject matter. But I tell you, it's been our privilege to have you on. Thanks to Brian there in Nashville hooking up the interview. But I am definitely going to make sure that I get a copy of this book. And if you're ever on a book tour in the Tampa Bay area, let me know, and I'd certainly come out and get an autographed copy.
Oh, excellent. I definitely will. I'll definitely let you know for sure.
What's the screenplay that's in the works? So a movie. Were you ever thinking about doing an audio version of the book?
So actually, I was just out in New York City a few weeks ago, and actually, yes, probably 2 months ago now. And yeah, I recorded the audiobook, so it's actually I'm reading it. If you can stand listening to my voice for a few hours.
You got a good voice.
The whole thing.